In this video, we're going to talk about variation, specifically direct and inverse variation. So the first type is what we call direct variation. And if I look at a graph of a linear function, whether it is positive or negative, I notice that as one thing goes up, so as my x goes up, y goes up. And if it was negative, it would be the opposite. As x goes down, y goes down. We call that direct variation. Another way to talk about it is that we say y varies directly with the value of x. And the equation for that is y equals k times x, where k is the variable that we call the constant of proportionality. So now let's check out an example of this in action. So let's say that in a factory, the profit P varies directly with the inventory I. And if I'm given P is 100 when I is 20, let's find P when I is 50. So these kind of problems work in 3 steps generally. The first is to set up our formula. So if P varies directly with I, I'm going to set P equal to I times K, or K times I, doesn't matter. And I'm going to plug in my 100 and my 20, and I find my constant of proportionality to be 5, so I know that K is going to be 5. I know I is 50, so I'm looking for P in that scenario, and P equals 250. Sometimes you have something called joint variation, and that's when you have more than one variable that is varying directly. And so the only change to the equation that we've been working with is that you would add the second variable to the very end. It's still all being multiplied. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say variable m varies jointly as the values of p and q. So if m is 88, I'm going to plug in 88 here when p equals 4 and q equals 0.4. So that means that 88 stays on one side of the equation and the other two are multiplied with the constant of proportionality. I'm going to plug all those in, and I can find m when p is 8 and q is 1.2, and I solve m to be my value down here. So on the other hand, we have inverse variation. So if direct variation creates a linear function, inverse variation is going to create a curve. So what that essentially says is that as one thing goes up, the other goes down, and vice versa. So if x is increasing, that means y is decreasing. If x is decreasing, that means y is increasing. So that's going to create a curve, something that may look like that. So it's not just going to be all the things multiplied together. What happens is if I say y varies inversely as the value of x, we're going to have y by itself, and it's going to be the constant of proportionality k divided by your x, because it is going to be an inverse relationship, so it's not going to multiply, we're going to divide. An example of this is, let's say in kickboxing, it's found that the force F needed to break a board varies inversely with the length L of the board. If it takes 5 pounds of pressure to break a board 2 feet long, how many pounds of pressure will it take to break a board that is 6 feet long? So F, if the force or if the first thing varies inversely with L, that's going to be F equals the constant of proportionality divided by the second thing that it varies inversely with. So I'm going to plug all that in to find the constant of proportionality, which is 10. I use that 10, plug it back in here, because I know my board is 6. I'm going to solve for F, and that's going to give me about 1 2/3 pounds. And finally, we can have a combination variation scenario where I have both direct and inverse variation together. Sometimes it uses the language of combination variation, sometimes it even talks about joint variation, but it will tell you which one is direct, which one is inverse. So let's take a look at this example of sorts. So let's say variable m varies directly as variable t and inversely as variable s. So what that means is variable m is on one side of the equation, and because it varies inversely, I know I'm going to have to divide here somehow. So I'm just going to write it in order. So m is going to equal to the constant of proportionality times t all over s, because m is going to vary directly with t but inversely with s. So s is going to be divided. And essentially what happens from there is I plug in all my things and I find my constant of proportionality. So I have 24 here, 3 goes there, 2 goes there. I find my constant of proportionality to be 16. I take that 16, I plug it in here, I plug in my 5 and my 8 because I'm going to be solving for m in this scenario, and m equals 10. And that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching.